Good morning, everyone. Welcome. If you're new here, my name is Rob. I'm one of the pastors, and it's great to have you with us. If you're joining us online today, it's great to have you, or if you're watching this later in the week, we hope that in this service that we're able to facilitate God's mercy to you, and you would be encouraged by that. Just want to give you a little quick announcement before we jump into the message this morning. Normally, in the summer, at the end of June, we transition to one service. And if you were here last summer, you remember that was cozy by time. So this year, we are going to continue two services, 9:30 and 11, right through the summer. And for those of you who watch online, the live stream will continue at 11 a.m. This is a good problem to have in the sense that the congregation continues to grow. It's a little uncomfortable when we're all here in the same room. But it also presents a challenge for us, and I want to present it to you this morning. We have a lot of volunteers that volunteer week in and week out. Welcome Center and hospitality, coffee, a nursery in particular, River Kids, sound, light, media, all of the different areas of ministry. It takes about 75 to 100 people every Sunday to pull off our two services. And some of those people have been serving week in and week out, and they need a break. So you're probably going to get a call or an email from somebody this summer asking if you would be willing to help out for a one-time doing this or that. I just encourage you to please say yes. Your yes allows someone else to have a break who's been serving in that area all summer long. And if we, as you saw with kids ministry, summer is such an important season of ministry for us, and we could use your help. And so if you're able to help in that way, we would greatly appreciate it. Today we're starting a new sermon series, more of a teaching series, really. And I'm really looking forward to it because we talk oftentimes about our congregation as being a beautiful community, meaning that this congregation is very diverse. It's made up of people from different economic backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different denominational backgrounds. And each of those aspects of our diversity really are a strength to us, but they require some managing and figuring out. One of the aspects of our diversity as a church also is that we're diverse generationally. We're diverse age-wise. We have young people in our church, less young people, and less young people. Or we have older people, and less older people that make up our congregation. And that creates all kinds of wonderful opportunities and gifts to us. But it also creates a number of challenges for us as well. And in the next 3 weeks, this weekend, and then we'll pause on June 9th, it'll be a very special community outreach service, and then June 16th and 23rd, we're going to look at kind of 3 generations. We've kind of broken them down very simplistically and probably oversimplistically into younger, middle, and older generations. So for the younger generation, which we'll be talking about today, those who are kind of 1 to age 27, so raise your hand if that's you. That would be our Gen Alpha or Gen Z groups. You are the one-con students who are sleeping in the back row because you were expended all of your energy. Okay, middle age demographic, this would be like 28 to 60. Raise your hands. Okay, now normally, if I could just be honest with you, it's really supposed to be 28 to 57. But it's Pastor Joe's 60th birthday. And I wanted him to feel a little bit younger, a little bit longer, so I stretched it out. So these would be our millennials and Gen X's. Then the older generation. If you're 61 years old or older, raise your hand this morning. All right, yes. We had actually cheering and competitive whooping in the first service. Raise your hand if you lied about what age group you are today. Look, I recognize when we use language like millennials and boomers, that doesn't translate very well to every culture, so that really won't be our focus. But the point is this: regardless of what culture or generation you grew up in, the generation that's older than you is different than you. And the generation that's younger than you is different than you also. And so we want to take some time to talk a little bit about that. And I realize for some of you, if you grew up in a different culture, maybe where elders were more respected and not so much kids, and you come to Canada, things feel very upside down and inside out, and you're trying to make sense of all of that, maybe this will be helpful to you as well. But why are we talking about this as a church? Well, it's because we're a family. We as a local congregation are a family. We're not just a big group of people gathered here on Sunday to get some religious thing checked off on our list and go off on our lives and do whatever we want. You are a part of a family here at River Cross Church. And your faith journey matters. The gifts that you have matters. We need you to use your gifts to strengthen our witness here in our community. You need us, and we need you. And we're going to talk about it because it's really hard to manage all of the differences that make up a local congregation. We see things very, very differently. And it's always been true to a certain extent, but we, in particular, because we grow up in a consumer culture, and like fish don't recognize the water they are in, we don't recognize the fact that how a consumer culture impacts how we view everything, including a local congregation like ours. It would be a lot easier for us, trust me, to say, you know what, we're going to have 19 different worship services on a Sunday morning. One for every preference, right? And if you like this style or this kind of preaching or this dress code or this whatever, we're going to just have an option for everybody. But here's what I would know would happen. At the end of the 19th service, someone of you would stop me at the door and say, have you ever thought we could do it a little bit different? We could do it like this or we could do it like that, right? There's no end to the differences. And so instead of kind of choosing the easy way and trying to make everybody happy, we've chosen the difficult way and make nobody happy. No, we've chosen what to be a family. Because I need you. Those of you in the older generation, those in the younger generation. Those of you in the older generation need the younger generation. Those in the younger generation need the older generation. And we right now are practicing for heaven because there's going to be a day when we will be family together in heaven. There's no kiddie tables in heaven. And so let's work on it now. And let it also be a witness to our fragmented culture about the power and the unity of Jesus Christ witnessed through a local church. So here's some of the challenges. How can we recognize the gift of each generation and how they bring it to the church? How can we recognize the differences and differences of opinion and differences of insight on different issues found in each generation? How can we keep from being siloed so that the kids never meet the seniors? We kind of keep them in separate tracks the entire time they're growing up in the life of a local congregation. How can we find our common identity in Jesus Christ and work together on the mission that Jesus has given us here in our community? Let me start with a story. Some of you would know that when I started ministry, I started actually as a youth pastor, which is the greatest job ever if you ever get to be one. And in youth ministry, oftentimes there can be a little bit of a tension that the students kind of get frustrated with the adults because the adults never do things the way they want. This is normal, and it's true of every generation, and depending on the church or the context, it can be lesser or greater exaggerated. Well, and oftentimes there's a sentiment amongst the students and the youth leaders to say, just let us take over. We'll run everything. It'll be so much better. Step aside. Just give us the reins. Just let us be in charge. And finally, it will be so good. Well, I had a youth pastor friend in Ontario, and he was a part of a congregation that had about 80 adults. But they had a youth ministry of 150. Mostly community kids. And oftentimes this youth pastor would invite these community kids to come to their Sunday morning worship service, which leaned a little bit more towards the older generation, and they never really understood things, and it wasn't a good connection, it wasn't a good match, and so the youth pastor said, that's it, I'm starting my own church. We're going to start a youth church where only youth can come. And he did. The church finally said, you know what? This is probably a good idea. Why don't we just bless you? You go start a church just for students. Music just for students. Preaching on issues relevant just to students. Dress codes and rhythms and habits just for students. And he did. He had his core group of 150, and they continued to reach other youth in the community, and the church continued to grow. It was quite a story. And then I talked to him a number of years later, and he was so frustrated. I said, what's going on? He said, well, these kids that I started with 8 years ago when they were in high school, now they're married, and they have children. And they want a nursery. Now we have to come up with like a nursery schedule and nursery policies, and and now they need a parking lot. Their parents used to drop them off to church, but now they've got cars and they're driving here and they're complaining because there's no parking for them. And they want policies around certain things so they get done well, and they want this and they want that. And he said, suddenly I realized I've just become like a boring old pastor of a normal church. This is what had happened to him. Today we're going to talk about the younger generation, to those kind of age 1 to 27, Gen Alpha or Gen Z. And I'm really grateful to Pastor Sandy, who did an exceptional workshop on this kind of demographic in particular, both for our staff and our CE board a number of months ago. And I'm sure if you pay her a large amount of cash, she'll give you your own personal presentation of it also. And we're going to keep things positive, and we're not going to go into cultural stereotypes, although that would be a lot of fun and we get some good laughs. And just remember that overall, these are general observations, and no doubt for those of you who are in this demographic, I'm going to be talking about you today, and you're going to be like, oh, that's not true of everybody. And I understand it. You can send me emails, and we can chat about it later as well. But just allow me this one quote. We'll start with this. Youth today love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority, no respect for older people, and they talk nonsense when they should be working. They contradict their parents, they talk too much in company, guzzle their food, lay their legs on the table, and tyrannize their elders. Who do you think wrote that? Well, this was Socrates in the year 400 BC. Now, we're going to talk generally about some things, and let me just, for those of you who are maybe like 29 and older, let me just talk to you a little bit about some of the things as people study kind of this young generation that I think are important for you and I to be aware of as their church family. One is this generation are digital natives. They have grown up with one of these babies. The internet and social media and technology have been a part of their life from the earliest of ages, where for my generation and older, that certainly isn't true. And it's a massive change on multiple different levels. Another one is that they've grown up in a culture that people would largely call post-Christian. Now, we can have a long debate about whether Canada ever really was a Christian culture, but certainly they've grown up in a generation with very little lingering shadow or influence from Christian faith. The Christian values are largely all but gone from our public world. I even went to school in, the 70s and 80s, and we had prayer at school, and they gave out Bibles at school. Things are different. This generation is not growing up with any kind of collective memory of Christian faith. In fact, more and more as we reach out to this younger generation, it's the norm now that when someone comes to church for the very first time, it's their very first time in a Christian church. And I don't think we can underestimate how significant this is in terms of their world being different than our world. Generally speaking, there's a heart for justice issues. And whether these issues are local or global, it doesn't matter. They're important. The world is flat. And there's an expectation that we're not just going to feel bad about it, but we're going to do something. And why won't we do something? There's a longing for meaningful relationships. In the most connected generation that's ever lived, there's a desire for real human connection. In fact, research says that 1 in 3 say that most young generation feel completely alone much of the time, and 40% would say they feel left out. That again and again in surveys, they say they want relationships with older generations. They want mentors, people to hear them, people to walk with them in their life. Not because they expect you to have any answers. They need companionship and people who will walk with them. Now, I want to stop here for a second and just say, as a local church, we have ministries to young people, and that's not the whole solution, but it's an important part of it. I just want to say to you how important these ministries to our kids and to our youth really are. They're huge. And when you get asked to be a youth leader, it's not because we need someone that is the Olympic champion at dodgeball or someone that's cool or whatever. We need someone that can be a good friend to a young person and model faith to them and help them navigate this really challenging, difficult generation that they are a part of. And we've got some incredible women and men who've said yes to that. Some of them gave up their entire weekend and went without sleep in a really loud, rowdy environment at one conference. They're here weekly on a regular basis, spending time with our students. And if you see them today, give them a hug. Say thank you to them because they play an important role. It's not all their job to do that. It's our whole church's responsibility. But it's such an important part of the work that we do together. Also, research said that this generation has an increased spiritual hunger. And I will tell you, if we were to kind of break down the demographics of new people that have been coming to our church, the majority of them are in this younger generation. And they are looking for answers and looking for faith. Let me just make a comment about how they generally view the church. And I love this quote from David Kinnaman. This generation is not as interested in whether Christianity is true, but whether it's good. Is Christianity good for you? Is there proof in your life as you live out your faith that it's good news to you? Is the good news of Jesus good to your family? Is it good to our church? When people come here, do they sense, wow, whatever they believe, it's good for them. It's making a difference in them, and they long to make a difference outside of their own walls in the community as well. Which is why things like pastor scandals and church scandals and hypocrisy and when we don't put our money where our mouth is reinforces the stereotype that the church isn't just irrelevant, and this is a growing trend, but that Christianity is harmful to you, and it's harmful to our society. And so for you and I to live out our faith, live out the good news, that it be good news to us, and that good news would be lived out in our city, becomes more and more important. Now, as a pastor, if you were to come to me and say, hey, look, there's a generation of people in your church, they're spiritually hungry, they value justice, they're open to being mentored and value relationships and really want to see that it makes a faith that makes a difference. Would you be interested in having these people in your church? We would say, yes, yes and amen. Now, don't hear it from me. We've interviewed actually some of our students from this generation, and we're going to show you a little video of their comments now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, input as a child. I feel that it is needed in Oxford.
I have an idea right now.
What's your idea?
My idea is for like the welcome ceremony, if like people are new, we might like give them some like river cross like t-shirts or something.
That's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah, I think so.
I would say that yes, the church does a really good job at listening to us, but I think they could be better at asking for our input. Well, when they get our input, they listen, but they also could be better at asking for it, I think.
This generation is not only welcomed, but also needed for their valuable input, as they bring fresh ideas and innovative solutions to address today's challenges and build a better future.
Yes, generally speaking, I do feel that my age group is welcomed in church, but maybe because of the age demographic, I don't see much input presented, but I feel like we're pretty welcomed.
I would like share more about Jesus, even not at church, at work when I grow up, and at school, at my house, where my friends are. I could do it everywhere.
Creativity and talents.
We bring different, unique talents. Like some people might be able to play an instrument. I can do origami.
They give a different perspective on things and a different way of thinking about stuff and doing things.
I think we bring energy, and I think we bring determination to want to get the job done.
I think the gifts that somebody in my season of life brings to church is a lot of energy, fresh perspectives, and like a willingness to engage in meaningful discussions and service activities.
The gift of spirit-led worship as a way of life, carrying worship with you as a culture and as a daily habit.
To hear more about Jesus.
Friendship, love, and kindness.
I've received the gift of friendship and being a friend to those who have my same interests and beliefs.
I've received like a gift of welcoming, and people have been really helpful to me.
I have really received community, and I think River Cross is great about giving community to everyone.
I think that I have received a sense of belonging, moral guidance, leadership skills, definitely, And yeah, most definitely spiritual growth. I think that's probably one of the most important ones.
I would say spiritual guidance gotten from the word preached every Sunday, as well as general life guidance and advice from the seniors around me.
I love church.
Let me read from you 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 6 to 16. Paul had been on a missionary journey. He came into a community. He met this young man, and he was so struck by his gifts and his abilities. He invited him to be a minister with him in the gospel, eventually taking with him on journeys, and eventually asking him to pastor a local congregation. And as he did, he was writing to him, giving him encouragement. And these are some of the words that Paul offered, starting in verse 6, chapter 4. If you point these things out to the brothers and sisters, you will be a good minister of Jesus Christ, brought up in the truths of the faith and of good teaching that you have followed. Have nothing to do with godless myths and old wives' tales. Rather, train yourself to be godly. For physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. This is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance, and for this we labor and strive, that we have put our hope in the living God, who is the Savior of all, especially of those who believe. Command and teach these things. Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for the believers in the speech, in life, in love, in faith, and in purity. Until I come, devote yourself to the public reading of Scripture, to preaching and to teaching. Do not neglect your gift, which you were given through the prophetic message when the body of elders laid their hands on you. And be diligent in these matters. Give yourself wholly to them, so that everyone may see your progress. Watch your life and doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save both yourself and your hearers. I'm not sure what stands out to you as you and I think about what it means to be a church of different generations, and Paul, the older generation, writing to Timothy, the younger generation. Let me point out a few things here this morning. First, in a culture that valued seniors and elders and not so much youth and young people, and saw youth as kind of a liability, and maybe some of you recognize coming from a culture like this, Paul encourages Timothy, use your gifts. Use your gifts. Command and teach these things, he says. They may not initially hear you or appreciate it and may say, who does this young guy think he is telling us how to do our business? But persevere in these things. Give yourself wholly to them so everyone may see your progress. This is Paul's way of saying, look, they may not hear you right away. They may discredit your words because of your age. So let your life back up your words. Let your lifestyle, your values, your decisions reinforce what it is you are encouraging other people to do. Lead with your life. Don't wait for someone to come around and give you permission to be holy or godly or use the gifts that God has given to you. Go ahead and live them out in your everyday life, and people will see. They will see your progress, Paul says. And as you're doing so, they will take leadership from you. They may say, look, little whippersnapper with your funny clothes and all your tattoos. You know, at first I didn't think you knew what you were talking about, but I see that you're sincere and you're living this out, and they will pay attention to you. Paul is saying to Timothy, we need you to live out your faith now. We need you to use your gifts now. Timothy, we need you. And we're going to conclude this series this morning or every week with the same kind of refrain as we talk about every generation, the middle generation on the 16th and the older generation on the 23rd, with this simple phrase: we need you and you need us. We need you and you need us. We need you, younger generation. Researchers are telling us this. This is their message. The future of the church is bleak. It's filled with old people, and younger generations aren't interested in organized religion, only personal spirituality and whatever's on your phones. And in 20 years, all the churches will be closed and Christianity will be dead. Have you heard this news report? And the temptation then for churches is to say, oh my goodness, we need to get young people into our church. And we need to get them here so we can keep doing church the way we're doing it now, but it's viable. And so that when we die, there'll be somebody here to continue on doing the thing that we've built for ourselves. That's a horrible attitude to have. We need the next generation now because they have gifts and ideas, perspectives, and energy, as the video said a few times, now. We need your commitment to matters of justice to make sure we're living out the words of Jesus now. We need you to lead, to speak, to volunteer, to give counsel, to help shape our thinking and actions and plans on things now. God gave you gifts now, not for later. And you understand things that we, for whatever reason, cannot get our minds around. And not just helping us download the latest app on our iPads. We need you now. And I want to say this to the older generation for a second. How many of you look around at youth culture today and the things you see in the news and say, hey, it looks really easy to be a young person today? That looks swell. Anybody? Or do you say, whew, that looks like a tough world to live in? It is our job to be praying, supporting, and encouraging this generation as they seek to not just live out their life, but also their faith. So, younger generation, we need you. And you need us. Let me just mention one thing as I think about one of the ways that we can be of help to you. In this congregation, in your church family, is an embarrassing wealth of people who have been through things that you probably will or might go through in your time. That if you were to come to Pastor Sandy or to one of your youth leaders or to one of us on staff and say, look, I've got this doubt, I've got this issue, I've got this question, I've got this situation in my family, I've got this thing at school or work, and I just don't know what to do, I'm feeling stuck, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I can imagine that we could find 10 to 15 people who've been through a circumstance similar to yours. And many who would be willing to say, look, I'd be willing to help, listen to you, pray for you, be an encouragement to you, because within this family of believers, whether it's a job situation, a mental health, a faith situation, there's people here who care for you and would be willing to walk with you in whatever thing you're going through. You need us as well. And so in this series, we're going to continue to work on what does it mean to be a family. We don't want to just be a lot of people in the room. And we really have a lot of gifts in this room today that will help us strengthen our faith and encourage us so that we as a local church can be the witness to Jesus here in our city. And I can't think of any better way to kind of start this series and think about being a family than to gather together this morning for communion around the Lord's table. Because in this table, we meet together and discover our unity first and foremost in Jesus Christ. So let's pray.